What's up, guys? It has been with Ben's election predictions, the most accurate predictor of elections for the 2020 presidential election. We just got a massive, surprising poll out of the Virginia governor's race. The governor's race is in 5 days, so we're closing in on the very end. But we just saw a Fox News polls, and so I want to make a distinction here. Fox News, the media conglomerate, they're right leaning. That they have a lot of opinion hosts. Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, they're definitely more right leaning. However, Fox News polls tend to actually, and we saw this in 2016 and in 2020, lean towards the Democrats more. So, I mean, this is a massive, massive poll. And Fox News polling, they are graded by 538. So this poll hasn't even been added to 538, but I can show you some of the old polls from Fox News. So there was a poll done, I guess two different polls. So one you have registered voters, and one that has the likely voters. We're more concerned with likely voters because those are the voters that are the most enthusiastic, that are going to turn out. In the Virginia governor's race, we are not going to see 80-70% turnout like we did in the presidential elections. The turnout's going to be lower. However, it's likely that turnout's going to be higher among Republicans than Democrats because of energy factors, because you have a Democrat in the White House. Joe Biden is very unpopular, especially with what's been happening in Loudoun County with the school boards. And I think we are going to see more energy on the side of the Republicans. And I think we've seen this with the crowd size of Youngkin's rallies, and just kind of who seems more enthusiastic to get out to bed. I think it was similar to in 2017 when we see Ralph Northam. I mean, he outperformed the polls a lot after what happened in Charlottesville. We saw a lot of Democrats were motivated to come out and vote. So yeah, as you can see here, so 538, they weight these polls some, just kind of depending on whether they think it's biased to the right or to the left. And we see this especially like with the approval ratings. So like Rasmussen reports, it's definitely more of a right-leaning poll group, similar to like Trafalgar Group. But so this poll just came out. It hasn't even showed up here, but it's going to change this. I think the average of the polls, Youngkin might even be up. I mean, this is a massive change. This is a 13-point swing. It went from Youngkin down by 5 to up by 8, and so Youngkin is winning outside of the margin of error. The margin of error is probably 3.5 to 4.5%. And so, I mean, this poll just came out about 2 hours ago when this video is going to be published. One thing that I think is interesting to look at here is the crosstabs. So the places where Youngkin is most strong is with parents. So I mean, obviously the parent demographic is not going to include the younger voters who typically are more Democratic leaning. So I mean, we can't just say, oh, like parents like Youngkin because of his schooling policy or blah blah blah. But we do see on education. Education has typically been a Democratic issue, an issue that Democrats run on. They typically run on, investing more in public education, teacher salaries, and blah blah blah. But I think as we've seen more backlash to critical race theory, and also what has happened in Loudoun County, and then also in the governorship debate, which I watched, which I thought was really interesting. McAuliffe had a quote where he said, "I don't think parents should be involved in their children's education," which was a huge gaffe in my opinion. I understand the point that McAuliffe was trying to make. He doesn't like when parents are like very boisterous and these meetings, anything that the teachers, the school administration should have more control. But I think Youngkin's message is appealing to a lot of maybe more moderate Democratic voters who don't like Trump. Because if everyone who voted for Biden voted for McAuliffe and everyone who voted for Trump voted for Youngkin, then obviously McAuliffe would win. But I think Youngkin is going to win some of these crossover videos, and we've seen anecdotally there's videos of lifelong Democratic voters who are coming over to vote for Youngkin. So we see that on the issue of education. Similarly, on crime, typically Republicans, when they kind of lean into the law and order message, this helps them, and I think Youngkin is treating these issues. I think he's a little bit more eloquent and he's a little more careful with his language than Trump. He's not just a wrecking ball. So he knows how to articulate these issues in ways that I think make common sense. Um, and on the economy here, and we see even Youngkin is doing a little better with COVID. Typically, this is how we saw, especially in the presidential election. This was an issue that Democrats typically do better on, that Biden does, just because typically Democrats want to take more action, do more mandates, do more bans on stuff. So people in the middle might think that Democrats are taking it more seriously, while Republicans want a little bit more hands-off approach and let parents make the decision on whether their children get vaccinated or have to wear masks. Um, but that's interesting here. So this is the Fox News article, and like I said before, I do want to re-emphasize that while Fox News is a Republican-leaning, right-leaning, you might say their news is a little biased to the right, their polls are not. So that they were the first media organization to call Arizona for Joe Biden. So their election central and their polling apparatus is not partisan at all. And their polls in 2020 were actually more Democrat leading. So that they're not like Rasmussen, they're not like Trafalgar Group. So I do want to emphasize that. Um, and so yeah, so among registered voters, Youngkin is still leading. However, we do think that the likely voters is a more accurate measure. So they ask people about whether whether they're interested in the election. We see that Youngkin supporters are more interested, which means that they're more likely to go out to the polls if it's raining or if it's inconvenient. They would be more likely. And we actually do see, so the margin of error is 3.5%. So Youngkin is leading, and it's not even a statistical tie under the margin of error. So this kind of shows the enthusiasm. And then the issue of critical race theory, definitely. I think, and we saw this in the cross-up, Youngkin is winning on the issue of education, which I think is kind of unprecedented. That a Republican would be leaning on it, but he's leaning on it effectively too. And I think the two main issue, or the three main reasons why, is first would be critical race theory. Second would be kind of McAuliffe's gaffe just in general, and kind of the general. And then thirdly would be what happened in Loudoun County. I think Youngkin really took a firm stance against what happened. He wanted it investigated against with the FBI, and while people more on the left side of the aisle kind of wanted to sweep that under the rug, it seemed like. Then fourthly, I would say is that like Youngkin has kind of condemned when um when Merrick Garland, he sent the Department of Justice to try to investigate domestic terrorism in the school board meetings, even though many people, especially Republicans, thought that was an overreach. So I think Youngkin can kind of use those four main tactics in education to turn out voters and maybe win over some more suburban moms. So um, we do see that suburban women that McAuliffe is winning them for the most part. But I mean, however, we see overall that Youngkin is +8, and Biden won suburban women. He won all these groups by bigger margins than McAuliffe is polling at right now. And then we can see here. So I mean, this isn't really a surprise to me that a Republican is winning these groups and a Democrat's winning these groups. However, the margins matter, and so what I think. Um, and then I also think this is pretty interesting too. Is the approval of um, Joe Biden versus the 2020 presidential vote. So only 43% of people approve of Biden. So if every person who approved of Biden voted, this wouldn't be enough. So that's why you've seen both candidates. I mean, Youngkin is. I think he's personally asked Trump not to come to Virginia because Trump's approval in Virginia is probably lower than 43%. But we saw when Biden went to go campaign for McAuliffe, I I don't think that was as effective as maybe McAuliffe would have liked, and he's had to kind of distance himself from maybe the Afghanistan withdrawal and some of the more unpopular things that Biden did. So I'm really interested to hear what you think. The last thing I want to cover is just in the past hour, we've seen the predicted odds change dramatically. And typically we don't see like a 10, 11 point shift like this very often, but because that poll just has massive implications in the lead, we've seen about an 11 to 10%. So McAuliffe is still favored, but I would not be surprised if we see Republicans go over 50%. And the last thing that I do want to cover is, I mean, some people have been calling this poll an outlier, and I mean, definitely that is possible. We saw about a week before the election, there was a poll that had Biden leading Wisconsin by 17 points, and this was an A+ rated poll by Washington Post, ABC, and we saw that this was completely wrong. So what my final prediction is, so before I'd say that McAuliffe was going to win by between half a percentage points and 1.5 percentage points. I actually think right now that I think Youngkin is going to win. Be I okay. I personally think that the margin's going to be between Youngkin winning by 1 percentage point, or McAuliffe winning by 0.5 percentage points. So if I had to guess right now, I would pick Youngkin actually, just because I think the energy is on his side. However, there is still time, and if Trump comes to the state, if then it could shift it in McAuliffe's favor. I think that's what most of the pundits are saying, and I agree with that. But I think this poll shows that Youngkin is surging and that he can win, and that this race is not going to be like California. While California is +25, +30, Virginia in the 2020 election was +10, but I think that was inflated for what it actually is, just because Trump was deeply unpopular. And I think Youngkin, because of how unpopular Joe Biden is, and because how well Youngkin has run his campaign, focusing on education, on jobs, I think that he can win. And right now, I think he is the favorite in my opinion, even though in the predicted they still have McAuliffe as a near favorite. So please like, subscribe, let me know what you think, and let me know what you want me to do for a future video. Thanks, guys.